What is good, people? Welcome back to another video on 8 Count. In today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at the UFC 276 pay-per-view, which went down on Saturday night. I'm going to give you my thoughts and opinions after some of the storylines which have come out since. Tomorrow, I'm going to be doing my video where I give you my picks and predictions for this weekend's UFC Fight Night. We've got Dos Anjos taking on Fiziev, and that should be a really intriguing one. As always, guys, if you do enjoy the video, please leave a like, comment down below, letting me know your thoughts on the UFC 276 card, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the upcoming content. And let's get straight into it. It was a really good card overall. I thought they had some stale moments at times, and certainly some upsetting moments, I guess you could say, with Donald Cowboy Cerrone and Jessica Ai retiring. But overall, really decent card. I'm going to start off with the main event. Israel Adesanya defends his UFC middleweight title once again against Jared Cannonier. Coming into the fight, I think it was fair to say that most people were picking Izzy. I think overall they thought that his skills were just too much for Jared, and I think they ended up being. I did end up picking Jared Cannonier off a gut feeling that he was just going to catch Izzy, but it didn't materialize itself in the end. I think Izzy showed parts of his game which make him so brilliant, but also so frustrating at times. I think he's got a skill set which allows him to be so comfortable on the feet with anyone at the moment in this middleweight division, and at times his opponents just don't just can't react to him, and it puts him in a position where he can coast and get the victory, and there's no need for him to put himself in trouble. I think he's a smart guy, and in the past he's talked about his thoughts on fighting. It's about being hit, about hitting and not being hit, and he wants to come out the game with relatively not too much damage, and I think that is commendable. But at times, it is a spectator sport, and I think that main event, I think a lot of people are over exaggerating how bad it was. It wasn't good, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't as bad as some fights I've seen, let's just put it that way. I think it was stale at times because of the fact that Israel wasn't ever looking, well, it didn't seem like he was looking that he was going to ever seem to put out Cannonier, and Cannonier just could not get close to Izzy. I think, Jared had success at times in the clinch, but, it wasn't doing any damage, and he certainly wasn't winning any rounds. I think it's probably fair to maybe give Jared one round at most, but a 5-0 sweep is totally fair as well. I think, for Jared, this was his last chance, really, 37, to go out there and claim a world championship, and he wasn't able to do so. But I think, it is what it is. I think at the end of the day, he didn't put enough risks. I didn't think he risked it enough at all. I think there were chances where, he probably could have done something a bit more, but I think he didn't want to put himself at risk as well. I think a lot of fighters come into a fight with Izzy and, think they can get it done, but as soon as they're in there, they realise the differences in their abilities, and that Izzy actually wants people to knock him out. If you want to knock Izzy out, he's got more chance of knocking you out, and that's just the way it goes. I think at times Cannonier just struggled so much with some of the footwork of Izzy. I think Izzy did a great job at always being able to recenter himself and get back to the center of the ring, and it really made it hard for Cannonier to back him up. On Izzy's point, I guess you could say, in future fights, maybe he needs to do more, but I think he's totally justified in, the stance which he is at the moment, and not taking too much damage. And, for a spectator, it's not going to be great, but for him, he's making fucking money and not taking too much damage along the way, so it's totally great for him. But moving on to the co-main event, which I think should have been just the main event on itself. I don't think it really needed a Israel Adesanya headliner. I think this fight had enough intrigue going into it. And I did end up picking Volkanovski. I thought he was the better fighter pretty much everywhere. I'm sure Max has some skills in certain departments which, will rival and maybe better than Volk. But I think in terms of Volk on the feet, I think overall he's a much better fighter, a better tactician. I think his wrestling's a bit better. I think his top game's really good as well. So I did find it hard to pick Max, despite, moments in that second fight being really close. For me, I thought it was a bit of a sad one to see Max go out in the way that he did. I think, for me, Holloway has been someone who's been putting on amazing performances now for what seems like the last decade. But for me, it was sad to see him in a sort of state where he just couldn't get going, and Volk was, just piecing him up at times, and it was sad. But I think this has probably highlighted something in Max Holloway in which he does need to potentially, look at himself and see where is he in this division and what is he in the game for. I don't think he's ever going to be good enough to beat Volk when both are 100%. I think Volk is just too good. And I think for him, he might have to look at going up a weight division. Maybe he stays at 145, maybe he retires, but I think he needs to probably take some time off and reimagine himself. I think there are certain, sort of ways in which I could see Max getting back to the top. Coming into the fight, I did pick Volk as well because of recency bias, I guess you could say. I felt that Volk looked really good in both performances against the Korean Zombie and Ortega, whereas Max, despite having a real standout performance against Calvin Kattar, I did think he looked off the boil against Yair Rodriguez. And for me, I thought you're only as good as your last performance, and I did feel like Volk had the upper hand coming in. For Max coming out of this, yes, it's a massive sort of defeat, not only for him in terms of his fight, but in terms of the trilogy. The rivalry's kind of over now, and I'm not too sure where he goes from here, but I think it's going to be interesting nevertheless. And I think there's certainly some fun matchups wherever he wants to go. 155, you look at some of the guys there, I think there's some really fun matchups you could put him in with, depending on how quickly you want to rush him in that division. I think you got Michael Chandler, who would be a great fight. I even think Dariush would be fun. I think Ferguson would be a great fight as well. I think there's certainly some things you can do with Max, and I'm sure this isn't the end. For Volk, on the other hand, I think this performance has leaped him in the pound for pound claim. For me, I'm never really someone who gives too much about the pound for pounds, but I think this has probably cemented him as your pound for pound number one and pound for pound king. If I say pound for pound one more time, I might fucking slit my throat, fucking hell. But yeah, Volkanovski, I think he came in and he did everything I thought he was going to do. Not down to the T. I thought there would be a much more feint heavy system. But I think he just punished Max every time Max would come in. And I think the amount of times he was clipping Max on the way in kind of started to freeze Max. I think you saw Max kind of go in and then he would freeze, and then Volk would pick him off and get out of range. And, the damage he caused Max. I mean, you've seen Max beat up in fights before, but never really like the way Volk did it. And I think that was a statement. I'd love to see Volk go up to 155 now. I think if anyone deserves to jump up a weight class, it's certainly him. He's talking about the fact that he can stay consistent and keep fighting at both 145 and 55 if he was to win both bouts. And I think that would be nice to see as well. I think he's more than capable of doing it. I just wonder how different he looks at 155 compared to 145. I think a lot of guys at 155 are going to have a massive source of size advantage over him, especially in terms of height. I wonder how he deals with that. But for me, he's definitely one of the best fighters right now in the game, if not pound for pound king. I think in terms of his ability not only to fight different styles, he's able to fight backwards, able to fight going forwards. He's able to freeze guys with, this feint heavy system at times. He can wrestle people. I just don't know, who's going to beat him at 145. I think if they do the Emmett fight next, that could be interesting, but I really don't think Emmett could, lace his shoelaces. I just don't think Emmett's on the level, especially in the striking. I think the wrestling, Volk would be able to shut that down pretty easily. And you never know, but that's just the way I feel. I think the Ortega-Yair Rodriguez fight is definitely going to be a fun one. And I think if Yair gets the victory there, I'd love to see him get a title shot. It'd be interesting to see how Volk would deal with his style, so awkward and unorthodox on the feet. I wonder if Volk would look to maybe use a wrestling heavy style. I have a feeling he wouldn't, and I have a feeling that the legs of Yair Rodriguez wouldn't probably make it into the fifth round. But I think it'll be an intriguing matchup either way. I think Volk now, you know, the ball's in his court and he can call for whatever he wants. I think the Charles Oliveira fight makes a lot of sense. I think it's a dangerous fight for Volk. But when I look at it on paper, I do think that, you know, Volk is the much better of the two standing up. I think that, you know, Charles on the feet is dangerous, but he gets caught an awful lot. And I think that would be ideal for Volk. It's whether, you know, Charles would be able to get him in some sort of scramble. And that's totally possible. But I think the way, you know, Volk and his team are able to put together a game plan and, you know, the tacticians that they are, I think it would be really hard for me to root against Volk in any matchup at this moment in time. We move on then to the third fight on the card, Sean Strickland against Alex Pereira. I picked Sean Strickland, man, and I was so disappointed in the way he showed up. It seemed to me that he had a really bad weight cut and he looked really drawn out on the scales and pretty shaky. So I might have changed my pick then if I'd have done the video then, but, you know, I stuck with it anyway. And Sean Strickland kind of came into the fight and he just looks so drawn of energy for me. I know his style isn't the most beautiful sort of stand-up style. You know, he does look a bit awkward at times, but he's very good normally. But I thought he played right into the game plan of Alex Pereira. And, you know, for me, I expected a lot more from Strickland. I thought he was going to put the pace on Pereira and make it really difficult for him. But that did not happen at all. And Pereira claims another knockout victory. And with 3 fights in the UFC, it is 3, he's going to get a UFC title shot against Adesanya. And I mean, it's a storyline which is just it was just meant to happen, I guess, when you look at it. I think the fight's an interesting one. I don't think I've watched a whole fight of both of them, but I've definitely seen highlights of both fights. Obviously, I think Pereira, the first fight may have went to a decision and Pereira got the nod, but I think it was very close. And the second fight, I remember Izzy did hurt him early on and Pereira got a late knockout and slept Izzy real bad. I just think, you know, I think actually if you look at both fighters, I think Izzy's actually the better overall in terms of skill set. I just think that Pereira isn't that far behind and he's got a whole lot of power to go with it and it makes him extremely dangerous. That left hook it's just beautiful. The way he sets it up, the way he can fucking kills people with it, basically. It's going to be a really intriguing matchup. Right now, I'd probably pick Izzy to get it done. But then you got to think it's 4-ounce gloves as well. You know, it doesn't take much. And if he can find Izzy, I think Izzy's going to be in trouble. But yeah, it was a great win for Pereira. And it's just, you know, he's gone from unranked to title contender in one fight. It's just crazy. Move on to the second fight on the card, Robbie Lawler against Bam Bam, Brian Barberena. I picked Brian going in. I just felt like Robbie Lawler was on his last legs against Nick Diaz, and despite getting a win, he looked terrible. I found at times he was a bit weird in this fight. He was just, you know, happy to kind of play that sort of game of just parrying some strikes and letting others get through. And Brian wasn't necessarily punching hard. He was just kind of throwing them out there. And I didn't really understand Robbie's game plan. I think it's clear to see at this stage in his career, he probably doesn't have the gas tank he maybe once had. I think, you know, you look at the fight, he was very much looking to conserve energy and explode in certain moments. But for me, I thought Bam Bam did a good job. You know, he's a veteran. He did get wobbled a couple of times, but I mean, the power of Robbie Lawler is legendary. And I think anyone goes in there and gets touched by him, they're not gonna, you know, not feel it. I think for Bam Bam, this is a massive win in his career. And for Robbie Lawler, I think this is probably the end. You know, I think the UFC can continue to stick him in matchups like this where he fights not necessarily up-and-comers, but kind of mid-veterans, I guess you could say. And I guess the fights will continue to be semi-fun and sloppy. But for me, I'd like to see Robbie end it. I think he's taken a ton of damage. And I was watching a video, I can't remember who it was. It was one of the MMA videos, and they was talking about, you know, since that Robbie Lawler 2 fight, you know, he had the Condon fight, which was another war, and since then his record's been absolutely dog shit. And it's a shame to see someone like Robbie be at this stage of his career, because you remember the heights and the high moments, and how powerful and intriguing and just how fun it was to watch his fights. But for me, I'd like to see him call it a day, and I hope he has a great rest of whatever he wants to do. I think he was a brilliant fighter, a brilliant champion, and honoured to have watched him fight, I guess you could say. We move on to the opener of the main card. Pedro Munoz took on Sean O'Malley in a fight which I was really intrigued to see. And Pedro, coming into the fight, I thought O'Malley would probably get it done. I thought his movement would give Pedro problems at times. And I thought if he could get enough chances, I think he could finish him. And the fight played out in a way I really didn't expect Pedro to do it. I did expect him to attack the legs, but I really can't remember Pedro throwing too much hands in this fight. He was very, he was mirroring the stance of Sean O'Malley every chance he got. He was attacking the legs whenever he could, and the stigma of O'Malley's legs being a problem for him, and he cannot take too much damage to the legs because it really affects him. Coming in, I thought it was kind of bollocks, but Pedro Munoz really stuck to that game plan. I think I gave him the first round pretty clearly. The second round was a lot closer. As long as it lasted, I guess you could say, but I think Pedro is probably still getting the better, because O'Malley wasn't really being able to put himself in positions where he's able to scoring shots, and despite only being leg kicks, they are damaging shots, and I guess you could give it for Pedro, which makes it so unusual for the stoppage, because I thought that Pedro was up. And I see a lot of people saying that he was looking for a way out the fight online, and at the time I thought it was a bit strange, because the eye poke incident kind of happened in a way where O'Malley's fingers were up, and it wasn't really like they were protruding into the eye. They were just kind of on the eye. And at the time, I guess you think, that can't be that bad. But for me, in the position Pedro was in, he had no reason to look for a way out. I felt like he was pretty comfortable in the fight. I thought he was doing a good job. And if you can't see, you can't see. And, I'd like to see him run this one back, even as a five rounder and some sort of UFC Fight Night main event. I think that would be fun, because that's another thing of O'Malley's that hasn't really been tested that much, is the gas tank. And I think with a durable guy like Munoz, it could really be put on display, because I remember in his early fights that, he would throw definitely more wildly than he does now, I guess you could say. But he looked to gas out quite quickly. And I think that's where some of the Conor comparisons came from at the time. But it'd be interesting to see him run this one back. I definitely don't think Pedro was looking for a way out, and these things sort of happen. And I think it is an interesting matchup, so I'd like to see that. Before we end the video, I just want to talk about a couple of the prelims. I wanted to talk about this Brad Riddell versus Jalen Turner fight. I thought, coming in, I thought, this was a step up in competition for Jalen, and he handled it really well, and he made light work of Brad Riddell, who no one really makes light work of. I think you look at the Fazayev fight, Fazayev getting the finish, I think, in the end, but, he had to go through quite a bit to get that. And Brad Riddell is, you look at some of the City kickboxing team, they hold him in such a high regard because of not only his ability to fight, but his ability to teach as well. And for me, I was super impressed with Jalen Turner, and after that win, he's only going upwards, and I'd be interested to see what they give him next. I'd like to see him get a ranked opponent. I think that could be a really interesting one. He's super gifted, he's really skilled, but you look at some of the natural physical attributes, and you look at his height and reach in that lightweight division, it makes him a problem for sure. Jim Miller, this one kind of stings a bit, I can't lie. Jim Miller defeats Donald Cowboy Cerrone via second round guillotine. I felt so bad for Donald at the time. That thing was cinched up real tight, and it was unfortunate the way it happened. I think Jim Miller won round one. I did think Cerrone started a bit slow of the two, and I do think that Cerrone does a lot of his best work when he's backing his opponent up. And in the second round, for Donald to throw a high kick as Jim's thrown a body kick, and caused Cerrone to kind of lose his balance, and Jim was able to jump on the guillotine and finish it like that. It was a sad way to end the career of Donald Cowboy Cerrone for sure. And for me, I won't forget this guy. This guy has given us so many fun fights over the years. You know, I can't really remember a time he wasn't fighting in the UFC. You have to go way back to pre the WEC coming in, and that was a crazy time as well. But yeah, I've just enjoyed everything that he has done for the UFC and done for us fans, because, you know, at times fights weren't able to happen and he's jumped in. Other times he's jumped in and done crazy things like go and fight Darren Till on, you know, that short notice. And for me, he's up there for me in terms of legendary status. Not the greatest fighter to ever step in the octagon, but one of the greatest showmen for sure, without being someone who is fake and tries to pull it out there. You know, he's just himself, and it's given us great moments over the years. Ian Gary with a tremendous win over Gabriel Green. I thought he looked terrific in this fight, and I think you're seeing his growth as he continues to fight in the UFC. He's becoming more, I guess you could say, expressive with his style, and it was a beautiful performance. But what I wanted to end this one on is Dricus du Plessis and his win over Brad Tavares, because that guy worked hard for that fucking win. I thought at times, I thought that Brad was going to win coming into it. I thought, you know, you look at the experience he's had and the fighters he's fought, you know, I think coming into the fight, he was the better fighter of the two overall. And Dricus really didn't play to his strengths, in my opinion. I think at times he was looking kind of wild, but he never gave up. And he put on an amazing performance and ended up getting a win. And for me, you know, there's not many South Africans, I don't think, in the UFC. But it's a market in which UFC really wants to expand, I feel like. And I think with Dricus, it's going to be kind of a wild roller coaster, because I think he's got an ability to really beat some really good guys. I think he's going to lose against some guys as well because of his style, but I think it's going to be fun. And, you know, for the South Africans, yes, JP, you know, I think it's going to be great to have someone like him in this middleweight division. What's next for him, I'm not sure, but I'd love to see maybe one more before he gets a ranked opponent. If not a ranked opponent right now, I think this guy's fun, and I think he's going to put on some great performances. But overall, guys, let me know which was your fight of the night and performance of the night down below in the comment section down below. And do you think Volk is the pound for pound king right now? Did he just leapfrog Kamaru Usman? In my opinion, he did. And as always, guys, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the upcoming content. Tomorrow, I'm going to do my picks for Fiziev versus Dos Anjos, which should be a brilliant fight. And I guess I'll see you tomorrow. Take care, and peace out.